Okay guys, today we are going to have a look at the 4-mark inference questions. And you'll notice that I've put down there, they are the first question on your exam paper. It's the first one you'll do. And on the right, I've put a picture of a bank. There's a reason for that. This question, you should be getting 4 out of 4 on. These are marks you should have in the bank, inverted commas, very early on. Right? So first of all, we'll dive into the keywords. We've got 2 keywords here really. Inference, so conclusion you come to based on what you can see and read, but you're not repeating. Evidence is your source material that you use to back up that inference. So to show you what this looked like, you might get a question like this. What can you learn about America in the 1920s from this picture? Below you have a man working on top of a skyscraper, he's putting it together, and you have plenty of other buildings in the background. The mark scheme for this question looks like this. 1 mark, you just take the source at face value, so you just describe it. 2 to 3 marks, you make an inference, but you do not back it up. 4 marks, you make an inference, and you support it using the source. Now, you will probably have used this before. There are sentence starters that help you do this. From this picture, I can infer that America was, and you write what you've figured out. Then, this is because the picture shows, and what's your evidence? What have you based your assumption off from the source? As some examples, I can see a man building high up in the sky, or I can see a man constructing a building, and there are lots of other tall buildings in the background. Both of those responses would gain you a mark, 1 mark only. They're only describing the source. And that person has not tried to figure anything out, they've just written what they can see in front of them. For a slightly better answer, I can infer that America in the 1920s was extremely wealthy. Or, I can infer that the construction industry was booming in 1920s America. Both of these are better. They'd get you 2 to 3 marks. Okay, they've made an inference, but they haven't told us how they figured it out. What was the clue in a source? So for a 4-mark answer, I can infer that America in the 1920s was extremely wealthy. This is due to the fact that they are able to afford to build the big skyscrapers I can see in the source. Or, this person might say, I can infer that the construction industry was booming in 1920s America. This is because there is already a large number of buildings in the background, and yet they're still continuing to build more skyscrapers. These will get you 4 marks. They both have an inference in the first sentence, and then they tell us how they figured out what it was in the source that they saw or they read that gave them these big clues. That's fine. It's 2 sentences. However, there are some problems that crop up. 1. Some people reach too far with an inference. Right? Now, what I mean by this is, it might sound weird, but for example, I can infer that Henry Ford's mass production techniques had a big influence on America in the 1920s. Because, now a lot of you are sitting there thinking, okay, Henry Ford's mass production techniques did have a big influence on America. And you'd be right. However, this source does not show us that. There is nothing in there about assembly lines, or about Henry Ford, or about his techniques that's a link, that's some evidence that you can use. You can't say, okay, I can see an assembly line, and they use these to help produce materials. There's nothing in there. So when it comes to supporting your evidence, you can't find anything. If you wrote that inference in the exam paper for that question, you would get 0. Because your inference has nothing to do with the picture. What you're trying to do there is some people are trying to make their own knowledge that this person clearly had about Henry Ford fit the picture. However, that doesn't work. Okay, just purely base your inference off what you can see going on in the picture. Don't try and bring something else into it that isn't in there. And secondly, do not waste too much time. It's a 4-mark question. It's 2 sentences as you've seen from the 4-mark answers. Otherwise, for the rest of the exam paper, you find yourself playing catch up. And those longer questions, like the 6-mark, the 8-mark, 16-mark, that you want to spend longer on, you don't have time to do. So make sure this is very quick. Find an inference, stick to it, get your supporting bit of evidence, write it down, and move on to the tougher questions. Okay, so to recap, you need to make sure that you are using inference and you're backing it up with some evidence. Now remember, these sources can either be written or a picture, but it's the exact same skill either way. What can you figure out? What can you back yourself up with? Follow those simple bits of advice and I'm sure you do really well with 4 mark answers.